Diana Reyes scored 198 points in the Family Feud Fast Money round, 2 points short of winning $20,000 for her 3 children. When Steve Harvey asked her the last question of the game and she stood at the podium, didn't answer, and instead told the studio audience something her husband had whispered to her in a hospital room 14 months earlier. 4 hours before he died. Steve Harvey's smile disappeared the moment the words started coming. He placed his cards on the podium slowly, one at a time, the way you set something down when you know you are not picking it back up for a while. He walked 6 measured paces to his left and stood with his back to the cameras for 31 seconds. Not for effect. Not for television, because he genuinely needed those 31 seconds before he could speak again without his voice breaking. When he turned around, his eyes were wet, and he made no effort to pretend otherwise. And he had already reached into his jacket pocket for his phone. It was a cool Thursday evening in Atlanta, Georgia, February 9th, and the Family Feud studio was 3 minutes from closing out a full episode when everything stopped being a game show. Diana Reyes, 41, a home health aide from San Antonio, Texas, had come to Family Feud with her sister Carmen, her sister-in-law Rosa, her cousin Maricela, and her daughter Sophia, who was 19 years old and sat in the first row of the audience for the early rounds before being brought to the stage for the final one. Sophia had her mother's dark eyes and her father's stillness, a specific kind of quiet that isn't emptiness, but presence. The quality of someone who has learned to take up exactly the right amount of space. The Reyes family had been warmly competitive all evening. They laughed easily. They cheered for each other between answers. And Diana had the composed, unwavering energy of someone who has already survived the worst thing that could happen to her and is therefore not particularly rattled by a game show. Steve had noticed it before the first question. During the opening introduction, he had looked at her and said, "You have a calm about you," she had said. "Thank you," and moved on. Just like that. No elaboration. The real story hadn't started yet. Diana's husband Ernesto had died of pancreatic cancer 14 months earlier, 9 weeks after the diagnosis. He was 43 years old. He had been a welder for 19 years. He had coached Sophia's soccer team for 6 consecutive years and had never missed a single one of Sophia's games across 12 years of watching her play. When the cancer made it impossible for him to walk to the sideline on his own, he had his brother bring a folding chair and carry it there for him, so he could watch the last 3 games of the season from exactly the spot he had always stood. The diagnosis had arrived on a Monday, a routine appointment, a different doctor, a scan that had been ordered for something unrelated. Ernesto was dead by a Friday 10 weeks later. Diana had taken on a second job the week after the funeral because the bills did not pause for grief. She had applied to Family Feud the month after that, not because she expected to win, because Ernesto had asked her to go. He had watched the show every single evening of their marriage from the couch after dinner, and he had always said Diana would be the best contestant they had ever seen. He said it repeatedly. He said it the week before he died. She had promised him she would go. Diana's 4 older family members played the first 2 rounds. They were sharp and well coordinated, and they moved through the game with the efficiency of a family that has talked about what it would take to come here, and has now arrived ready to do exactly that. The Reyes family built a 150-point lead going into the final round. The opposing family, the Hendersons from Charlotte, a generous and cheerful group who played with genuine warmth and competed without a trace of anything unpleasant, had made the second round close but ultimately came up short. Diana stepped behind the Fast Money podium. The audience cheered. Steve gave her his full attention. She answered the first 4 questions with clean, direct confidence, not fast in the showy way, but fast in the way of someone who knows what they know and doesn't need to perform the knowing. When the cumulative fast money score appeared on the board after 4 questions, 198, the audience held their breath. 2 points short, 1 question left. 2 or more points on the last answer, and the Reyes family won $20,000. Steve looked at Diana. He drew a breath. He asked the 5th question. Name something a wife keeps that belonged to her husband. Diana stood at the podium. She was quiet in a way that was different from thinking. She wasn't searching for the survey answer. She had gone somewhere entirely different. Somewhere in a hospital room in San Antonio, on a Friday night in December, in a plastic chair beside a bed where Ernesto had been awake at 3 a.m. and had called her name in a voice that had already become someone else's voice, smaller and farther away than the voice she knew, and had said something to her that she had not repeated to anyone outside her immediate family in 14 months. His hands had been cold. He had held hers anyway. The machine beside the bed had been making its sound. The hallway had been quiet the way hospital hallways are quiet at 3 a.m. The quiet of a place that has made its peace with the weight of what it holds. She had leaned forward to hear him. He had said what he said. She had carried it since then like something precious and breakable that she did not trust anyone else to hold. And there is a particular loneliness in that, in the carrying of a gift that cannot be shared because the sharing feels like it might diminish it. She had replayed his words in the car on the way to work in the dark hours of the morning. She had replayed them while standing at a hospital bedside, doing what home health aides do, which is care for people who are approaching the same door Ernesto had walked through, quietly and with professional grace, while carrying a private room inside herself, where his last sentence lived. She had not told Sophia, not because she thought Sophia couldn't hold it, but because it had been given to her, and she had not yet figured out what it meant to give a piece of it away without losing the whole thing. Grief is not always grief. Sometimes it is a form of debt management, the accounting of what you owe to a person who is no longer present to receive payment, and the slow, difficult work of understanding that some of the debts cannot be paid, and some of them were never debts at all. Steve said her name, quietly and carefully. Diana. She looked up. She looked at him the way a person looks when they have just been returned from somewhere they didn't fully choose to go. And then she said, "He told me to stop apologizing for things that weren't my fault. He said I had spent our whole marriage apologizing for things that were not my fault, and that he needed me to stop doing that. He said that was the thing he most wanted me to keep. Not a ring, not a photograph, not a piece of clothing. He said, stop apologizing for things that aren't your fault. And keep stopping. Every day, keep stopping." The studio fell completely silent. 300 people stopped breathing at the same moment. Not the usual game show pause, not the held breath before a score. A different kind of silence entirely. The kind that arrives in a room when someone has just said something so true and so private that the air itself changes. Steve Harvey placed his cards on the podium. He placed them slowly, one at a time. He walked 6 paces to the left. He stood with his back to the cameras. His shoulders moved. The audience watched him stand there. The crew watched him stand there. A producer in the booth had taken off her headset and set it down on the console. After 31 seconds, a production assistant confirmed this later. Because she had counted, Steve Harvey turned back around. His eyes were wet. His jaw was set in the way of a man who is holding something in that is determined to get out. "Diana," he said, "I need a minute." He took the minute. He stood in the center of the stage, and he breathed and he looked at the floor, And he did what people do when they have been given something they did not expect and need a moment to figure out how to carry it. Then, he looked up. He did not pick up his cards. He looked at Diana Reyes with the direct attention of a man who has just understood something about her that changes how he sees every moment before it. "I'm going to tell you something," Steve said. He paused to make sure the words were the right ones. "I know what it is to carry things that aren't your fault. I know what it is to apologize for existing. I spent 3 years living in my 1976 Ford Tempo. I showered in gas station bathrooms. I ate behind restaurants on the nights when there wasn't another option. And every morning I told myself that I was the reason everything had gone wrong, that I had done this, that it was mine to carry." He stopped. He pressed his handkerchief to his face for a moment. "Somebody finally told me to stop. One person. Just one. And I held on to that for 30 years. He looked at Diana. "Ernesto gave you the same thing. He gave you permission. And you are going to keep it." Then he turned to the board. "Let's see what Diana got." The board revealed the final answer: wedding ring. The survey counted it. 6 points. The total score, 204. The Reyes family had won $20,000. But Steve wasn't done. He stood in the center of the stage with one hand raised. The audience quieted. "We're going to stop the game for a minute," he said. A producer stepped forward from the side of the stage. Steve turned toward the producer and shook his head, gently but clearly. The producer stopped. "No network approval," Steve said. "This is me, Steve Harvey." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He dialed. He put the call on speaker. When a voice answered, he said, "It's Steve. I've got a family here. Diana Reyes, San Antonio, Texas. Her daughter Sophia needs a full university scholarship. 1st year minimum. More if we can arrange it. I want it set up in Ernesto Reyes's name. I'll handle the details. Just get it started." A brief pause on the line. Then, "Yes, sir." Steve put the phone away. The audience was standing. He was not finished. He looked at Sophia, who had been standing at the end of the family row with her hands pressed together and her eyes full. "Come here," Steve said. Sophia walked forward. She was 19 years old, and she was shaking very slightly and trying not to. Steve looked at her for a long moment. "Your dad watched this show every night," he said. "He asked your mother to come here. He didn't do that by accident. He knew exactly what he was doing. He looked at Diana. He wasn't just watching a game show. He was leaving you a door. And he built it for you while he still could." He turned to the Henderson family, who had been standing across the stage in a quiet that had its own quality. The quiet of people who understand they are witnessing something that requires nothing from them except their presence. The Henderson family captain, a man named Jerome Henderson, walked across the stage without being asked. He took Diana's hand in both of his and held it for a moment. He said, "Ma'am, we are truly honored to have been in this room tonight." He said nothing else, because nothing else was needed. Then he walked back to his family. Steve watched him go. Then Steve said, "The Henderson family played a beautiful, generous game tonight. They go home with $5,000 from my personal account, because that is what a family that plays with that much heart deserves." He turned to both families. Tonight, everyone wins. This has never happened in the 45-year history of this show. When the episode aired 7 weeks later, Diana's answer at the Fast Money podium went viral within the first 4 hours of broadcast. By midnight, the clip had been shared 100 million times. Grief counselors, therapists, and domestic violence advocates shared it specifically as a resource. An example of what it sounds like when one person gives another permission to put down a weight they've been carrying alone. The hashtag #StopApologizing reached 3 million uses in 48 hours. The clip was discussed on morning television in 6 countries. A professor of psychology at a large university included it in her curriculum on the language of healthy relationships. She said, in 9 words, Ernesto Reyes articulated something that therapists work for years to help their clients feel. It is one of the most important things I have ever heard a person give to another person. 3 months after the episode, Diana gave an interview in which she said that the Family Feud taping was the first time she had said Ernesto's words out loud to anyone outside her immediate family. "I thought maybe keeping them only to myself meant they were mine," she said. "But Steve looked at me like I had done something right by sharing them. And I think I think he would have liked that. He would have liked that they reached someone else." A year after the taping, Sofia Reyes finished her first full year of college on the scholarship Steve had arranged. She is studying social work. She wrote Steve a handwritten letter and mailed it to the Family Feud studio. He referenced it on air weeks later. Not by name, not without permission, but with the unmistakable reverence of a man who has been reached by something and wants to acknowledge that. "A young woman wrote me," he said. "She told me her father used to watch this show every night, and that she understands now why he made her mother come on." He stopped. "I'm glad she came." What is rarely mentioned in the viral clip, and what Diana has spoken about in subsequent interviews, is what happened in the car after the taping. Destiny drove. Diana sat in the passenger seat. Sofia was in the back. They drove for 8 minutes in complete silence. Then, Sofia, from the back seat, said, "Mama." "Why didn't you tell me?" Diana said, "Because I was keeping it safe." Sofia said, "You kept it safe. And now it's ours." Diana has said that this is the moment, not the taping, not the podium, not the 204 on the board, that she considers the real gift Ernesto left her. Not the words themselves, but the moment when she finally let someone else hold them. He knew, she has said. He knew that if I said it out loud on national television, I couldn't keep it only to myself anymore. He made me go on that show because he wanted me to learn how to share it. He was still teaching me. From a hospital room, he was still teaching me. 5 years after that Thursday in Atlanta, Diana Reyes became a licensed grief counselor. Her practice is in San Antonio. She specializes in complicated grief, the kind that comes not just from loss, but from the long years of carrying things that were never yours. On the wall of her waiting room, there is one framed sentence. Not a degree, not a professional certificate. A piece of paper in her own handwriting. "Stop, that's not who you are." Below it, in smaller letters, ER, December 2022. She still watches Family Feud every evening. She says it is something she kept, not the prize, not the scholarship, not even the moment on the podium. The habit that Ernesto gave her, a couch, a game show, an evening, that is what she kept. She watches it, and she feels the weight of him in the room, and she does not apologize for that either. If Diana's story, and the deathbed gift Ernesto gave her, moved you in a way you weren't expecting today, subscribe to this channel and hit the thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who has been carrying an apology that was never theirs to give. Because sometimes the most important gift one person can leave another is permission to put something down. Have you ever had someone give you permission to stop carrying something that wasn't your fault? Leave your story in the comments. We read every single one. And ring that notification bell, because more stories about the courage it takes to keep going and the people who make that possible are coming every week.